Hi there. In this video, we're going to go over how to build a generic data copy pipeline in Azure Synapse Analytics. So first thing we want to do is what's going to be required is obviously a workspace. I'm going to need a storage account for this and some form of source data. I'm going to use an Azure SQL database. So we're also going to need a key vault just to follow best practices. So I've got all of that set up. If you don't, then you should probably go ahead and do that now. So the first thing we want to do is we want to open up the studio. So whilst that's opening, let's see. Hopefully all is good. There we go. So I'm gonna start by creating a pipeline or a folder just to contain my generic pipeline. So I'm going to call this generic pipeline. And the second thing, so I normally work with data lake patterns. So I'm going to create a generic pipeline that will take data from a SQL database and store it in a data lake native pattern or file format, like Parquet, for instance. So I'm going to create a new pipeline. And I'm going to give it a descriptive name or a name that's fairly descriptive. So I'm going to call this one generic SQL to Parquet. Cool. Now, there's a couple of things that we're going to need. So because we're going to create a pipeline that's going to connect to a SQL Server host, and we want to make this generic, we're going to need to know the SQL Server name, so the connection string. So we're going to create a new pipeline parameter, and we're going to call this one SQL Server name, just like that. The next one we were going to create is SQL username. Let's keep it with camel caps, so proper formatting. Then we're going to need to know, so like I said, we need a key vault for this. So I'm going to need the key vault secret name. So SQL key vault secret name. Then we're going to need to know a data lake file system. So the container. And we're going to need to know data lake, lake path. I'm not going to, sorry, let me fix this L there and this L. I'm not going to care much for the file names because file names, I like to keep them auto-generated. It just helps a little bit. Because normally when I set up an ingestion pattern, I normally do date partitions in my data lake. So, well, a combination of schema and dates. So I don't necessarily need to know what specific files I want to re-ingest it. I just worry about the partitioned folder. Cool. So now we got the basic parameters. Let's just think about this. So we have a storage account file system. We've got a lake path. We got secret name, a username, and a connection string for a SQL. So, another one that might be good to have is probably SQL well, we're going to keep this generic, so SQL source table. So we're going to drive the tables through parameters. Cool. Now that that is done, we can then start and pull in our first copy activity. So we're going to call this one gen SQL to parquet. Okay, and that's our first copy activity. Now, what we would like is, or what we now need to do is start creating some data sets. Now, it's always best practice when you're creating a generic pipelines to have a generic data set, right? And it's tempting to use built-in linked services, but you should create specific ones for your pipelines. And there's good reason for that we'll go over at the end of this video. So the first thing you want to do is we're going to create our source. So I want to use a SQL. I'm going to use a generic SQL Server connector because that can connect to our Azure database as well. So we're going to say SQL Server, and this is going to be generic SQL Server. I'm going to have to create a new linked service. And this linked service is going to be called generic SQL server ls. I'm going to call for linked service. I'm going to use the auto runtime. If you need to create a generic pipeline to communicate or connect to your on-prem networks, you obviously have to use a self-hosted runtime in this case. Right. Server name we're going to parameterize. So we want a parameter called SQL server name. Right. And we're going to put that in there as dynamic content. The next thing we want to know is the database. Oh, I forgot that. So I'll create that parameter just now. So we go add new and we go SQL database name. Select that. We're going to keep SQL Server authentication. So obviously with this type of connector, you can't use MSI. If you were using the Azure SQL DB, you could have used the managed service identity to connect to that one, but you can't. We're using the generic SQL Server connector. So username, we're going to add dynamic content. I'm going to add another parameter on this linked service called SQL user name. Right. And with password, here's the best practices piece. So we're going to use Key Vault. I'm going to create a new, because I haven't created a linked, service yet. So we're going to create a new one, and we're going to call this Tech Lab Key Vault. I'm just going to quickly select my subscription and the Tech Lab Key Vault. I'm going to hit commit. And when we do that, it's also, I think it deploys it at the same time. Right, our secret name we're going to add dynamically, and we're going to then create a new parameter called Tech Lab Key Vault. Actually, sorry, parameter is SQL Key Vault secret. Okay. Boom, hit OK, SQL Key Vault secret. Cool, so Let's see, is there anything else here? No, that looks good. We're going to say commit. It's not going to do tests because this is dynamically driven, so that tests or the connection tests will be done at runtime. The only test it's going to do is the connection to the linked service for the key vault. So this one might actually fail. Yes. I forgot something. I need to add the managed service identity for the workspace to the key vault. So we're going to quickly go and do that. Create an access rule for it. So let's just go in there. Let's go into access policies. Yep. We're going to add an access policy. We're going to grant it get permissions like that, and we're going to select our principal, which is the Synapse workspace, and we're going to add that. Now we're going to add this twice, and the reason we add it twice is because we need to allow it to do execute on behalf of as well. So we do a compound access policy like this. We add an authorized application as well, and you have to create one with just the service principal and then one that's got the actual application principal as well. And you can see that this is now compound, so this has an execute on behalf authorization to the key vault as well. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go here, and we're going to say commit, and hopefully this goes better. And and not. What is it failing on? Oh, it's complaining that the linked service doesn't exist, which is a royal pain in the butt. And we obviously can't. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to not use the key vault. We're going to say we're going to use password. I'm just going to hit password, and I'm going to just type in something and just say commit, and come on, please work. There you go. Sweet. Right, next thing, I'm just going to hit OK here because I'm going to need to just commit all quick. And hopefully it's going to be publishing errors. Okay, right, that's fine. Right, let's go back to the pipeline, and hopefully this key vault is now generated. I should have created the key vault link service first and published, but let's see. So if we go back to here, right, now remember we had our parameterization, so now it wants all these from the linked service, so we're going to go ahead and start adding them. Oh, why are they not? Oh, because it's here. So we're gonna need to add the parameters again on the data source. Just hold on. SQL. Actually, we're gonna cheat. We are going to go into the linked service. We are going to, right, can't do it this way. We can only cheat once we've done this first. Right, so let's create a new parameter for, well actually, let's not do it here. Let's do it here. So first thing is that, so we need that parameter. Then we go back here. We need that parameter. Then we go back here. And we need that parameter. Then we take our last one. We got the parameters. Right. Then we go back to connections, and now we can add them through dynamic content. And here, single click is all you need, not double click. Right, so now we've got a way of passing the required parameters from the linked service into the data set or data source. We're going to go ahead and commit that. And we're also going to need a parameter for the table. So there's going to be one for the schema. So we're just going to add here SQL. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to repurpose the table name just to make this simple. We are not going to use table names. We are going to use a SQL query rather instead of tables. We're going to say query here, and we're going to go up into our query, and we're going to go and say, sorry, text functions, come on, string functions, concat, and inside of the concat we want select star from space, and then a comma, then we throw in the SQL table or SQL source table. Right. Oh, these are the wrong quotes, I believe. There you go. So there's our dynamic string. And we're almost done. We now need to fill in these. So the SQL Server name. And these were the parameters on the pipeline that we created first. And here's the database name. I forgot to create that one, so I can just go ahead and create that one here. SQL database name. Save. Then we're going to add the SQL username. And then last, key vault secret. Cool. We're going to need to go back into the linked service and fix up this key vault as well. But anyway, we're almost there. Cool. The next thing you want to do is fix the sync. So obviously we've done our source, so we don't. I'm not going to reuse anything that's here. So we're going to create a new one, and we want this to be a data lake storage account 2 or Gen 2. So go ahead, and we're going to choose Parquet for this. I'm going to name this generic Parquet. I am at this point I could use, and I'm actually going to reuse the default linked service because I don't need to recreate these ones. I would recommend um, to generate or not reuse them, but rather generate a generic one, right? So then we're going to step into the Advanced tab so we can access this. And the first thing we need is the data lake file system. So remember we created a data lake file system parameter, so we need something to access that with. So we go data lake file system. And then we need the folder. I'm going to call this data lake folder. Oopsie, I forgot to create it. Create that. Then we can add it. Okay. And commit that. So now we can go in and populate the data lake file system with the parameter we created in the beginning, which is data lake file system. And then data lake folder we can populate with the other parameter called data lake path. Okay, try to keep these consistent. So I didn't do that, but oops, yeah, try to keep them consistent. It's for the best. Cool. So now we have pretty much almost completed our generic pipelines. We just want to go ahead and commit all. And then let's see if we can publish these or if they're still broken. No, it looks good. So you can see now it's going to publish the linked service, and it's going to take our data sets, and then, oops, that's some code that was modified the other day. Right, so if we publish this now, there we go. And we're good. We can now go back into the source. We can open up our linked service here and say edit. And we can now go back to the key vault, select our linked service that's not published, and then add our parameter for our key vault secret. Right, I'm going to hit apply. This in turn will now have another requirement further up in the data set or in the source. There you go. So if we now go close that. Oh, that was all populated. Oh, it was all populated because I had the parameters already. Sorry, my pipeline disappeared. Just find it. There we go. Right, so there's our generic pipeline. Now, you might think, what's the point of this? Well, if we have a generic process where we're storing this configuration, we can then call this configuration through lookup task. But let's just go ahead and fire a pipeline and see what it does. So the first thing is first, we obviously, when we debug this, we need to figure out what we need. So we need to know a SQL Server name. So I have one here. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy out that name. And let me flip what I'm doing. So I have the SQL Server I want to connect to. right? So let's go and put that in. So there's my SQL Server. The next thing I want is a username, so I know this one, so it's ETL admin. I need a Key Vault secret to call. So in the Key Vault, I'm obviously not going to show you what the key is. I have a secret called ETL admin. So I just go ahead here and call ETL admin. And then source table. So this is now, let's go and find the table. So we in here, we have our AdventureWorks sales data. So if we go on to tables, I don't know, let's take something fairly small. Let's take product. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and just create a new query like that, and just so I can do this. Right, so let's just copy that in. So remember, this is going to be passed in as dynamic SQL, right? So it's going to append select star from space and then the table name. So let's step back to here. So we're going to pass in that in the source table. And then the database name, so in our case, this was sales data, I believe. Let's have a look. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And then step back to here. So database name was sales data. Right. Our file system, I really don't remember what the file system name is, so let's just go back to our storage account. So it was this guy, or we can use, we can't because I'm waiting for debug. Not that one, that one. In here we have containers. In containers we have that. So we're going to go ahead, copy that out, step back to the portal, boom, and I'm going to type in, I'm going to go ahead and create something that's a little bit valid. So in a data lake, so data take on, we should always have a raw zone and ingestion zone, right? So I'm going to say my path is raw / I'm just going to paste in the table name, take away special characters, and follow best practice by lowercasing everything. And the reason we lowercase is because, well, you guessed it, it's case sensitive. And yeah, for something like this, like a schema name and well, in Microsoft SQL, generally you don't use case sensitivity, even though you can. But most of my deployments aren't case sensitive. Cool, so it looks like we have everything we need. We're going to go ahead and say okay, and hopefully I've been praying enough to the demo gods that this pipeline won't fail, and we don't have to debug. Right, so in progress, we can step in here, and we can see, oh, it's done already. So we can see it copied the whole of 295 product lines, and it did so in record time of like 4 seconds. Cool, so we're going to go ahead, close this, and then we're going to step out into the data lake. So linked services, storage account, this guy, I think. We should have a raw folder. In there we should have our sales LT, and then product, and then we should have a nice nasty GUID name. And we should be able to go open script, select top 1000 or top 100 rows, off you go, and Bob's your uncle. Here's our data. So let's just go ahead and do validate on count, even though I know this is going to be right, but count 1. And there you go, 259. I'm just gonna be lazy. I'm gonna go copy that text out, switch back to Management Studio, and just go ahead and paste that in there. Then execute, and we should get 295 there too. Ooh. Oh, wrong database. Sorry. Demo blunder, sales data. And execute. 295. Yay, we have parity. We can also go ahead and select everything out of here just to show that hey, the data looks the same. Cool. Right, so that's our generic pipeline. Now, you might think, well, what's the point in this? Well, let's say that we want to ingest everything, right? We want to do this dynamically. So if we remember our little query from earlier, so we needed a source SQL name, a SQL Server name, we needed a table name, we needed a username, and something else. So let's just start writing this up. So we go select, and the first one is SQL Server name. So in this case, we can just go ahead and hard code that. So I just gotta grab that quick. Right, so that was our server name. The next thing we wanted was our SQL database name. And we can go ahead and hard code this here as well. We're going to hard code that to sales data. Right, and then we have our SQL user name. And we're going to go ahead, just for this exercise, and hard code that in as ETL admin, because that was the SQL Server account that we were using. And I'm going to copy that and just call that SQL Key Vault, or KW name, right? The next thing we're going to need is our well, we're going to now start needing things like a table name, right, from our source. So, we have this thing called information schema dot tables in a database, and this is consistent in most ANSI standard, well, in most information schema from. Sorry. So information schema is an ANSI standard. You can build generic pipelines not only for Microsoft SQL, but for Oracle SQL, or MySQL, or PostgreSQL. They will all have, well, I think Oracle is the only one that doesn't have information schema in it. I think everyone else does. So the first thing we wanted was the table name. So here, that is called table. So we needed fully qualified. So we wanted table name or table schema and dot table name. So I'm going to go ahead and go SQL table name. We're going to say equals table schema plus full stop plus table name. Right, let's just see if that works. We execute that, boom. Yeah, looks all good. right? For clean, normally we should actually quote encapsulate these, or square bracket encapsulate them, just to be 100% happy. Right. Then if we think about the next thing, so we wanted a file system or data lake file system. We can hard code that. Um, Data lake, I'm going to abbreviate it to FS, and we're going to hard code that to raw. No, sorry, my bad. That was specific. So I need to go back to our data lake count. That was specific. There it is. Copy that. And then we step back to Management Studio. Right, paste that in here. Boom. There's our file system. The next thing we wanted our data lake path. And that we're going to make dynamic. So the first step we want is our raw folder. Then we're going to want our schema name. So if you remember, I added raw slash schema, and then we're going to put another slash, and we're going to add the table name just to separate everything, right? Then we're going to go ahead and execute that. So we now have our parameters we need. We have our server name, database name, our username, our key vault name, our table, our data lake account, and our data lake path. Right. There's a couple of tables here that I don't want in, so I just want the ones that have the sales LT schema, and with good reason, because I've got some large synthesized tables here that would make this exercise very slow to demo. So we go here where table schema not wait, like sales LT. Okay, all good. So we cleaned up that. Okay. We pulled through, I think this is a view. Okay, that's okay. Right, so here's a query that brings us all our parameters. So if we want to now apply that, we can go back to our workspace, and we can go into our integrate. And so we have this generic pipeline that now fires a whole bunch of stuff. So now we're gonna create a new pipeline or new folder. We're going to call this control pipelines. Right. And the first control pipeline, well, we're only going to create one control pipeline in this demo. So the first one, we're going to call this sales data to raw. Just to, oh, sorry, it didn't take. Sales data to raw. Cool. First things first, we're going to need a lookup task because we're going to execute some SQL. We're going to call this lookup task get config. And then we're going to go to our settings. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to do this one as quick as possible. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it is an Azure SQL database. I am going to create a new linked service. And I'm going to go ahead and just select my server and our sales data. Just really quickly. I am going to use SQL Server Authentication. This is ETL admin. We're going to use the same connection thing. I'm going to use our Key Vault secret because, damn it, oh, darn it, sorry. I'm going to use our Key Vault secret for this one because I shouldn't be managing passwords. I'm going to hit, so we're going to call this config db. All right. And there we go. Right. We are going to say this is config query. Oopsie. Config query. Right. And in here we're going to put query and we're going to paste in our query. We're going to preview the data and hopefully nothing breaks. There you go. Here's our single line of data, but we should have more. Yes. Remember when you're doing lookup tasks to untick this default row that only brings in the first row of data. The reason that one is there is because if you're looking up a single value, generally in a sort of, if you think of it from an SSIS data transformation task or data flow task, there would have been probably only one hit in the lookup that you would need. Anyway, here's our pipelines or our configuration for our generic pipeline. And we are going to send that or then bring in an execute pipeline task. We're going to connect our lookup to that one. We're going to call this one and say execute generic SQL to Pocket. And on the settings, we're going to go for generic SQL to Pocket. There you go. And voila, here we go. A whole bunch of values coming up. Now, we need to get these values from our query. So I'm going to very quickly go and grab them. So first thing I'm going to grab, and I'll do this off screen, you can't see it, is the server name. So we add dynamic content. We want get, oh, sorry, my bad. I forgot the golden thing. We need an iteration task first that we're going to put this into. So we need a for each task, and then we connect that to the for each task, and then we're going to call this one iterate config. We're going to go ahead and cut that pipeline out. We're going to hit the activities tab and paste in that pipeline. Good. Step back here, click on the for each task, click settings, click items, and we're going to now pass in the get config, but we don't want it to return an object because the output here, this will be an object. We want the actual value or object as a string. So we're going to go and type in value. What's going to happen is that we're going to get the JSON object outputted as a string, and that we can iterate through. Right, then let's go into the for each activity. Now we can go into the settings of this guy. So first thing we need is the server name. So that column is called SQL Server Naming in our config table. So let's just go ahead and dynamic content item dot name of the item. Hit finish. Next one is the username. So I'm going to go ahead, step through that. Item dot SQL username. Then we want key vault secret, and that was called SQL key KV name. So we go ahead, current item dot, there you go. And then we want data lake file system, and that is called data lake FS. So dot data lake FS. Then we want the data lake path. Right, copy that out and item dot data lake path. What else? SQL Server table or the SQL source table, which is called SQL table name. Right, copy that out. Dot SQL table name. And then the last one, which is the database name. We could hard code this, but we're not going to. We're going to do this properly with a parameter, a hard-coded parameter in the query. Right, or hard-coded value from a dynamic query. There we go. So there's our last value we need. So we're going to go ahead and commit this. Nothing should break because we already tested that it works. We're going to go ahead and publish this. And there we go. There we go. So if we go ahead and debug this now, we're now firing our query. So it's busy executing its lookup. And if we have a look at the outputs of the lookup, we can see our JSON object, right, with our values, right, and it should now be executing pipelines. So obviously in debug, this is not going to be super fast, but you can see that it's working through the pipelines one by one. And we can have a look at the inputs to see where they are. So we're now busy pulling in that product model catalog description thing, etc., etc. We won't get proper debug, or you won't be able to drill into these through this view. You need to go and you won't. There we go. You can see them here. This is the only way for you to be able to see what's going on through the monitor. And here you can step in and preview the action. So we can see that we're copying stuff. Go back to the old pipeline runs. And not sure which table we're on. But we should be done. We're just waiting for the final. Oh, there we go. There's more to come. Cool. So now, let's quickly step in through to the storage account. So if you remember in the file system, we had only this product tables. Now, if we refresh here, maybe there's a, here we go. I didn't lowercase. So Remember I said that was case sensitive, so now we have the schema in uppercase. And here you go. Here's all the information schema objects that we have um, that we're busy running through. So let's see where we are. Okay, that's done. Are we still? Oh, there we go. We're completed. So now if we go in here and we refresh, right, we can open up one like the sales order detail. So if we step into that folder and we go ahead and go and select top 100, we can then start going and wildcarding the stuff. Oops. So I want to step to the end here and then just take that out, put an asterisk in. So we're now able to query this data. So here's our sales order detail table. Right. So as you can see, by spending a bit of time to generate a generic pipeline, you can then um, drive that through a master pipeline uh, through configuration. And in a future video, I'll be walking through one of these metadata driven frameworks that I've developed, and show you how you can literally just point at databases and ingest them at cloud scale speed. And you don't have to do anything. It will build out the whole configuration for you to sort of leverage, yeah, these type of generic patterns. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please feel free to post a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Anyway, thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye.